Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, did you know that the explosion in the amount of data that is being created is expected to grow nearly fivefold by 2025 to 175 zettabytes per year? And the reason is because all things in the virtual world, from databases, networks, containers, systems, applications, and the physical world, homes, cities, factories, power grids, are all being instrumented. Just thinking about that mouth-watering stat there, I think Keanu Reeves might say, whoa. But organisations are emitting relentless streams of timestamp data. And because of that, some are starting to realise the value of these observations. But they haven't even begun to scratch the surface of the intelligence that could be harvested here. To put it into perspective, these kind of learnings can inspire better customer experiences, automate factory floors, and also build previously unthinkable applications. So with all that in mind, I've invited Paul Dix onto the podcast today from a company called InfluxData. And on their website, it states that data is best understood through the lens of time. And the InfluxData platform is empowering developers to be wildly successful in building next-generation applications. And I should also highlight here, they are helping Cisco, IBM, PayPal and Tesla build transformative monitoring, analytics and IoT applications quicker and to scale, ultimately delivering new insights from their data. So I invited Paul on the podcast today to talk about why time series data is going to be the biggest hurdle and opportunity for tech organizations in the future, and also discuss the importance of open source technology for ongoing innovation, which is also crucial, I think, especially as tech innovation is going to require real-time system observability with granular insights to make more precise decisions, to optimize operations and improve customer experience. But hey, enough scene setting for me. I'm not the expert here. So let's get Paul Dix onto the podcast now. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Paul. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm Paul Dix. I'm the founder and CTO of InfluxData. So I'm a developer by training. InfluxData makes an open source time series database called InfluxDB. It's useful for tracking sensor data, tracking what's going on in your servers, application performance monitoring, real-time analytics, that kind of thing.
And we will have people listening in and outside of the tech community. So we'll have a lot of business leaders and decision makers listening as well. So for those people, just help them understand the scale of the problem that we're talking about here. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more about what time series data is and how and why it's going to be the biggest hurdle and opportunity for tech organizations in the future?
Yeah. So, I mean, put simply, time series data is really any data with a timestamp on it. But to drive it to like a more real use case, there are generally two different kinds of time series data. One is like metrics data, which would be readings coming off of sensors, or if you have a bunch of servers, say that you're monitoring, you'll be taking readings off of them, say once every 10 seconds or once a minute. So this is just a bunch of data that's coming in all the time that you want to either monitor in real time or ask historical questions about. And then the other kind of time series data is basically event-driven data. So that could be a person walking into a store. It could be a container in some infrastructure turning on or off. In the sensor data use cases, that could be, ships coming into port. It could be trucks leaving and going. Any sort of like events that happen that you may want to track over time. So the thing is, like, when you think about like analytical questions and analyzing things, almost all analytical questions, I think, are really time series related, because you're trying to, gain intelligence about how things change over time and ultimately monitor those things and take action based off of them. So the thing I realized basically when I started the company, the insight I had early on was that time series was basically a useful abstraction for solving problems in a number of different areas. So our key areas that we focus on are server monitoring, application performance monitoring, sensor data, which could be, you know, oil and gas wells or shipping or trucking, but it can also be, consumer sensor data like wearables and that kind of stuff, or say thermostats in your house and smart appliances. And then real-time analytics, which is kind of just a generic catch-all for like business intelligence, for user analytics, basically anything that you want to track that's important to your business in real time.
And in the current climate, I think that a lot of businesses are now going to be trying to do more with less. And there's a big argument that it could be a catalyst for innovation right now. So, how important do you think open source technology is for ongoing innovation in this field?
I mean, given that this is basically like infrastructure software, it's the underpinnings for other things that get built on top of it. I think open source is absolutely critical. I think open source is key, not just for for driving the price down and for helping people cut costs, but it's also key for collaboration across the industry. When you have other companies collaborating on core pieces of infrastructure that isn't necessarily their key intellectual property, open source is really useful for that, and it basically means that you get more innovation, with less.
And I've got to ask, where does InfluxData fit in all this? You've done a great job of setting the scene there. So, what kind of problems are you solving at InfluxData, and what makes you different from all those other solutions out there?
It depends on how you look at InfluxData. If you look at us as like a database company, what makes us different is the fact that we are focused on time series data as the use case. So we have performance optimizations that make it so that we can ingest, millions of data points per second. We have optimizations on the storage side so that the data is compressed and it takes up a lot less space on disk. So there's that in the database side of things. But with Influx, we aim to make an entire platform. So we view this as like a number of different things that people have to accomplish to be able to solve problems with time series data. So one side of that is storing and querying the data, which is the database side, but then the other is, say, collecting the data. That's, pulling data from sensors, pulling data from servers, pulling data from logs, operational logs, that kind of stuff. Then you have to visualize the data so that you can get insight from it from human consumption, both on like dashboards and like drill down experiences and exploring it. And then finally, you have to process that data in real time so that you can do monitoring and alerting on it, or you can do like data enrichment and add stuff to it. So we provide all the pieces to create that entire platform, and our goal really is to drive towards developer productivity. We want developers and users who pick up our technologies to do things way faster than they otherwise could have done with other solutions that they piece together. And the problems that they're solving, like I said, are like server monitoring. They have a bunch of servers they have to monitor to make sure they're up. They have to do capacity planning over time. Sensor data is like I said, a key one for us. We have a number of customers they're tracking sensor data. One is a company called Bbox in the UK. They have solar panels all over the world that they're tracking sensor data from to track, how much electricity they're generating, how much they're storing, how much they're giving out, that kind of stuff.
And I think I should also highlight that InfluxData recently raised $60 million for time series database software, for the time series database software last year. But can you tell me more about that funding, how it's helping you progress forward, and what it means to you?
Yeah, so that funding was January of 2019. It was led by Norwest Venture Partners with participation from our previous investors. And when we raised that funding, we certainly didn't have a need for it. We actually had the entire previous round of funding still in the bank, but the timing was right, and with Norwest, we saw an investor that we could partner with to really grow the business, right? And that's making more investments in the core underlying product and the innovation there, but also expanding our presence in EMEA and elsewhere around the world.
And we've talked about the importance of innovation in technology, and also believe that you've got a big role in IoT applications as well. Is that something else you can expand on?
Yeah. So IoT is kind of a generic catch-all that's very, very broad, because there are all sorts of applications in IoT, and we see them all. Like we have a customer that monitors sensor data from apple trees because they're a cider maker. We have another one, like I said, that's tracking solar panels. We have other ones who are monitoring oil and gas wells. Wind turbines is another one. So those are all kind of like more industrial ones. But then there are some, right, which are just like smart appliances or wearables or that kind of stuff that are more nascent, that are like consumer grade IoT kind of stuff. But generally what we see is the stuff that's more mature is the stuff that's in like factories or power generation or that kind of stuff.
And I'm curious, in your day-to-day, on your conversations with clients all over the world and in multiple industries, are there any kind of trends in the kind of problems that they're all going through at the moment and they're coming to you for help with? Are you noticing any trends around that at all?
I mean, really, the only trend is just that the amount of data that they're collecting is expanding exponentially fast.
Yeah.
Like it's exceptionally fast. And the thing is, that kind of follows when you think about sensor data, right? Because you can choose how frequently to take a reading from that sensor. It could be once an hour, or once every 10 minutes, once a minute, once every 10 seconds, multiple times a second. Like there's, at some point you can go down to a very fine-grained level of detail, and as you collect more data, sometimes you can get insights that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to see. And the thing is, like, people are just deploying more and more sensors around the world, right? They're like sensor arrays where you literally have thousands of sensors in a few feet, and you're taking readings off of every single one of those things. So the volume of data is really like the most difficult thing, and how to properly move that around, how to store it, how to downsample it and summarize that data is a problem that people are grappling with.
And as lockdowns begin to ease now, we go back to normal. Hopefully, not a new normal. Get our old normal back. What's next for InfluxData? Is there anything you can share about the road ahead?
So we're currently working. We have version 2.0 of our entire platform available in the cloud. We launched that last fall. We have it available in AWS and Google, and we're making it available in Azure. And then the other thing is the open source version of 2.0 is currently in beta, and later this year we'll be moving that into a full general release.
Fantastic. And for anyone listening that'd like to find out more information about the work that you're doing, stay up to speed with the any announcements throughout the year, what's the best way of getting hold of or best way of finding InfluxData online and contacting your team if they wanted to carry on the conversation we started today?
Yeah, so of course there's our website, influxdata.com. On Twitter, our account is actually InfluxDB, so we monitor that. We have a community Slack channel that we run that we pay attention to, and we also have a community discussion board, like comment board that we host, and all of that's accessible via our website.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, Paul. There's so much value hidden in there, especially when we're talking about why time series data is going to be a big hurdle, an opportunity for tech organizations in the future, but the kind of solution that you're offering towards that, and also the importance of open source technology for ongoing innovation too. But more than anything, I appreciate how busy you are, and a big thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. So thanks again, Paul.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
I think at some point we need to get Paul back onto the podcast and dive a little bit deeper and learn more about what's behind the popularity of these new database categories and how each and every one has become associated with specific use cases, and maybe explore how that can help developers identify the databases that work best for specific projects. But hey, that's a conversation for another day, because I am conscious I give you a different interview every single day. And I try and keep them in a bite-sized format, because if I was to give you an hour, 2-hour podcast today, you'd want to kill me. That's why I always try and keep the interviews quite short, just so you can dip your toes into the virtual waters and understand how technology, and in today's case, why time series data is going to be the biggest hurdle and opportunity for tech organisations in the future. So finally, as always, I pass the virtual microphone over to you. Let me know your thoughts about anything in today's conversation. If you'd like to come on the podcast, if you want to ask me a question, if you want to work with me, whatever it is, email me techblogwriter@outlook.com, and my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. Now, I would love to stay and chat with you some more, but I've got tomorrow's episode to get ready now. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.